Good morning, everyone. I'm Joseph Clark, the president of the Toronto Global Forum. On behalf of our presenting partner, Cogeco, in fact, all of our partners, welcome to this, our 19th edition of the Toronto Global Forum. For 5 years now, we've been working with the Ministers' Council on the Canadian Francophonie to showcase Canada and particularly the strength of its bilingualism. I can think of no more important session over the past 5 years than this one, strengthening Canada-Africa partnerships to capture emerging opportunities. I'd like now to introduce Christine Bergevin, runs her own company, but some interesting things about Christine. 40 years ago, although you'd never know it, Christine joined EDC, Export Development Canada, and her desk was Africa. So I can guarantee you're in great hands with her. She's been a member of our advisory board for many years. She has enormous talent, time, and energy. Christine, over to you.
Bonjour à tout le monde et bienvenue. Ce panel sera principalement en anglais. This panel will be mostly in English today, but everyone can use the language of their choice. So it's a pleasure, but it's a privilege for me to head up a panel. My name is Christiane, but that's okay, Joe, I'll forgive you. And yeah, it's been 40 years since I was first involved on Africa, and it transformed my life as a business person, as a person having this knowledge of the amazing potential of Africa. So welcome to this panel that's about strengthening the relations of la Francophonie to best seize what was said as emerging opportunities, but I'd say to best seize spectacular opportunities. So before I introduce, or why don't I'll introduce our panelists right now, because I think it's a great group, and I'll introduce them in the order that they will speak later on. So Matthew Davis is the founder and lead investor in a very innovative venture capital group called Renew, based in Kigali. Well, they have offices in multiple countries, 13 countries. They've done about 40 deals already of bringing venture capital and stimulating that fertile land. And we welcome Matthew. Merci beaucoup, Matthew, for your presence. Isabelle Doucet, who sits at the extreme right, is the head of the, and I should say this correctly, of the Director of International and Multicultural Francophonie, New Brunswick, and she's the personal representative of the Premier of the province. And she has a background in commerce and international development. She was for a stint for 2 years at the Canadian Embassy in Paris, and she will speak today about how New Brunswick has used a very innovative approach to leverage its relation with France. As our third speaker, and today we have Son Excellence, l'ambassadeur Appolinaire Aya, and who also is the Congo, Republic of Congo ambassador to Canada, but also represent the Francophone Africa ambassadors in Canada, and we'll say why it's so important. His Excellence as a master in philosophy, and also is certified in Europe to be a teacher. He served in Paris. He's a specialist of relation and bringing the landscape that we'll need to foster greater trade. And last but not least is Parliamentary Secretary to Foreign Affairs, the MP for Ottawa-Vanier for multiple years, Mona Fortier, who I can say has been a champion for Francophone Africa and for Francophone presence on the trade, on the cultural and education scene for all these years. So welcome. And before, so the format today, very simple. Each speaker will speak for about 4 minutes, and then we have a set of interesting questions. But before that, I'll just ask you to think a little bit about Africa in a different way. Think of a market of 450 million people with whom we are uniquely connected. By comparison, the United States is 320 million people, so 30% bigger than the States. The youngest population projected to reach 900 million people by 2050. It's also a market connection, the language and more, where Canada has been active since 1960 to aid, commerce, and trade. Now, what are the bilateral trade with that group of countries, Francophone Africa? Well, last year it was $15 billion between Canada and Francophone Africa. Do you want to compare with France? Do you think France has greater relations with Canada than Francophone Africa? The answer is no. So it's slightly below 15 million. And the third largest partner for Canada, trade-wise, after the States, China, is actually the UK at 30 billion. So let's just think, can a group of countries that are also the second largest destination for mining, Canadian mining investments with 40 billion assets, first producer worldwide of copper, first producer of diamond, first producer of cobalt, is it logical to think that in a few years it could be our third largest partner? And obviously there's a presence across the country, and we almost had a US Tennis Open champion this year from Canada for the first time ever, Félix Auger-Aliassime, who has an African background. And Mr. the Ambassador showed to me a picture with him and Félix in Morocco a few weeks ago. So that's the strength of Africa and the relations that we have, the Francophonie. And I'd like to praise and thank the Ministers' Council in support of Francophone Africa, represented by Sylvie Pinchot, the Director General, and her team. And do think that something else that we have with Francophone Africa, we have a Minister Councils represented by all the Canadian provinces. Each province in Canada sits on that council. So we're connected. Plus, we have a Mayor's Council. So, on that note, let's start our panel, and I hope we find new ways today to seize the spectacular opportunities of the Francophone Africa relations with Canada. So we'll start in starting to speak about real example, moving to those who hold the relations and the programs. So private sector, provincial government, leading to Mr. the Ambassador and Madame Fortier. So Matthew, 4 minutes, and we'll be running this panel punctually.
Okay, is this working? Thank you. Great introduction. Thank you all for attending, and it's an honor to be on stage with you all. Matt Davis, I run a venture capital firm in Africa. Kind of feels like a confession meeting. But the reality is that, and I love the statistics that you just pointed out. Right now, most people don't know Africa or even view Africa as an investment destination. But I would think that if you were to bring an alien into Earth and drop them down and give them the statistics right now of where the world is, and you were to ask them, okay, just make a bet on where you think the greatest growth is going to happen over the next 25 years, they would say, right there, Africa. Why? Well, as most of the world is dying, meaning there are more people that are dying than having new children, new birth, Africa is the only region of the world that is actually growing. Africa is going to add 1 billion people to the workforce by 2050. Over half of those people are going to live in cities. The continent is absolutely growing faster than anything you could imagine. And every time we get people to get on a plane, and before our investors get on a plane, we say, just take a moment and pretend like it's the turn of the century, of the 19th, 20th century. and pretend like you're walking through the streets of Toronto or New York. Leave all of your guilt behind and come over and look for opportunity. Almost every one of them leaves investing because they see that right now on the continent, everything is changing. And what happened at the beginning of this year, while dramatic, it is going to shepherd in a new era for the continent like we've never seen. Governments are taking responsibility of their future. And all of a sudden, the dialogue about private sector is top of the list. And I think the opportunity now that Canada, and specifically the fact that you all are bilingual, you're the only G7 country that has a strong French and Anglophone background. The continent, 31 out of the 54 countries are Francophone. You have the ability to walk in, and it is wide open for any country right now, and I think Canada is strategically positioned to step in and be one of their great partners. So we've been partnered with the Canadian government to build up on the ground what is now one of the largest investment firms on the continent from a geographic footprint perspective. We're very proud of that. And now we just have to turn that on. So I'll share more about that on the panel, but I'm so excited to be here. I think this panel and this forum and this conference really is at a great moment happening, because what we're going to see happen over the next 10 years is going to be like nothing we've ever seen on the continent before.
Merci, Matthew. Very interesting and intriguing at the same time. I would like now to ask Isabelle to look at how some provinces take a very specific, very special advantage and benefit from these relations they've created. All yours.
Merci, Christiane. Thank you, Matthew, for your comments. New Brunswick has been a full member of l'Organisation Internationale de la Francophonie since 1977, so almost 50 years. But we haven't been very good at building bilateral relations with the Francophone countries other than France and Belgium that were easy. And over the past 5 years, we saw our population grow by over 100,000 people. Like for 20 years, New Brunswick, we were 750,000 people, and all of a sudden, the population has been growing, and a lot of it is immigration from Africa. So what we've also been hearing, and I've been traveling to mostly West Africa since 2016, is that the governments are telling us, okay, Canada, it's nice that you're coming here and recruiting all the people that were investing, we're educating our people, and then you're coming and taking them away. So the past 2-3 years, I'll say I've been thinking and brainstorming with our governments and our different departments on how we can think and act differently. And that's when we decided to launch a strategy for Francophone Africa. And our strategy focuses on 4 pillars. Number 1, education. What can we do with Africa in terms of co-investing and co-developing in terms of education? And we've been partnering with investors from different countries and opening schools that are offering the New Brunswick curriculum, either in French or in English, because we are an official bilingual province. We do have organizations that are able and structured to sell the New Brunswick curriculum and work with those schools in Tunisia, Ivory Coast, Morocco, and those kids that are graduating from those schools are graduating with a New Brunswick diploma. Second pillar is training. So our post-secondary institutions, l'Université de Moncton mainly, and the community college network have been partnering with post-secondary institutions in those countries too, on looking how to offer 1+1 or 2+2 programs, double diplomacy programs too, and really associating our professors with professors in those African countries and starting to train people in their countries. Then if they want, a percentage of those students will come to our post-secondary institutions in Canada and then hopefully a percentage will also get a work experience and maybe want to stay. The third pillar is ethical recruitment. So yes, we've been recruiting a lot, but it's got to be a win-win situation with the African continent, right? So ethical recruitment for us, it means that we are working with the governments on site when we are doing those recruitment missions. We are making sure that they are aware, they are okay, and we are offering something in return when we go recruit people either in the health sector, teachers, in the construction industries, and it's by signing and agreeing to those win-win agreements on what we can give back that the door remains open to recruiting the more young people from Africa. And the four pillars, of course, it's building those economic opportunities. So with a growing African population in our province, well, there's a bigger and bigger diaspora, right, of those countries. And how can we work with those people that do want to do things with their own countries and with Canada and New Brunswick? So how can we build those bridges between New Brunswick and Africa? And it's a long-term investment. I mean, New Brunswick is the most dependable province on the US in terms of export. 92% of our exports go to the US. So getting our businesses to think differently and to look at other places, it's gonna be a long-term effort, but it's exciting that today at the Toronto Global Forum, we are talking about those opportunities with Africa because, as it was mentioned before, it is the fastest growing population in the world.
Merci. Thank you, Isabelle. Maintenant, Monsieur l'Ambassadeur, et Monsieur l'Ambassadeur will be making his point in French, and I will paraphrase, and I will maybe even add more to what you said. À vous.
Je m'exprime en français parce que je veux que le message que je dois donner aujourd'hui puisse être authentique. Parce que mon anglais n'est pas académique, donc je ne veux pas me risquer à vous dire ce que j'ai à vous dire en anglais. Je suis coordonnateur donc du groupe des ambassadeurs francophones, mais je suis ici aujourd'hui pour vous parler de l'Afrique francophone, que beaucoup de Canadiens ne connaissent pas toujours. L'Afrique francophone est peut-être l'une des zones les plus riches d'Afrique, parce que c'est plusieurs pays, et quand on réunit ces pays, ils sont, comme l'a dit notre modératrice, numéro 1 au niveau du cobalt, numéro 1 au niveau du diamant, numéro 1 au niveau du cuivre, numéro 1 au niveau du bauxite, et même au niveau de l'uranium, nous sommes peut-être parmi les meilleurs puisque les plus grands gisements d'uranium sont au Niger. Ça, c'est en ce qui concerne les minéraux. Mais l'Afrique francophone regorge également des minéraux critiques. On a des terres rares qui peuvent intéresser le Canada. Mais le Canada doit comprendre que l'Afrique a changé. Ce n'est plus l'Afrique des indépendances. C'est une Afrique résolument moderne, avec une élite qui, petit à petit, émerge. Mais nous avons besoin du Canada comme partenaire. Pourquoi ? Parce que le Canada n'a pas de conflit historique avec l'Afrique. Le Canada, c'est un partenaire vierge qui va arriver en Afrique pour établir un vrai partenariat gagnant-gagnant. En dehors des minerais, en dehors de tout ce que vous connaissez déjà, l'Afrique, sur le plan agricole, est numéro 1 mondial du cacao. Peu de gens le savent. La Côte d'Ivoire est un pays francophone et c'est le premier producteur mondial de cacao. Avec le Ghana qui est voisin, ils sont premier producteur mondial de noix de cajou. Donc, nous avons également des terres arables propices à l'agriculture qui ont besoin de l'expertise du Canada. Mais l'Afrique francophone n'offre pas que ça, parce que peu de gens savent, mais sur le plan géostratégique, l'Afrique francophone offre avec Djibouti le plus grand contrôle sur le golfe d'Aden. C'est à cause de ça que vous verrez qu'à Djibouti, il y a la plus grande base américaine en Afrique, il y a la plus grande base chinoise, la seule d'ailleurs, base chinoise en dehors de l'Asie, se trouve à Djibouti. Donc, le Canada est attendu par cette Afrique-là. Et cette Afrique-là sait que le Canada, dans sa quête, dans son développement, a besoin de ces 450 millions d'âmes qui vivent dans cette partie de l'Afrique. Et cette Afrique-là a au Canada une diaspora dynamique, une diaspora qui participe à l'ensemble des sphères de décision au Canada. C'est donc une richesse. Et cette diaspora peut nous servir de pont entre ceux du Canada qui pensent qu'ils peuvent investir en Afrique et ceux qui sont en Afrique qui attendent que les Canadiens arrivent. L'Afrique, on parle toujours de l'Afrique en posant des questions de sécurité, de stabilité. Non, il y a une Afrique dynamique, une Afrique qui bouge, que de l'extérieur on ne voit pas. Mais moi, j'ai eu la chance de traverser ce continent du sud, donc de Madagascar, l'extrême sud, jusqu'au Maroc, de bout en bout. C'est un continent dynamique. C'est un continent qui va vous surprendre. Et, entre nous soit dit, c'est le continent de l'avenir. C'est le continent de demain. Et si vous voulez être dans ce demain avec l'Afrique, c'est aujourd'hui. C'est aujourd'hui. Et je suis heureux d'être ici avec la secrétaire parlementaire des Affaires mondiales Canada, avec Mathieu qui a fait un exposé brillant sur l'Afrique dans sa globalité, parce qu'effectivement, dans quelques années, on sera 2 milliards d'Africains, dont 70% auront moins de 25 ans. Il n'y a pas meilleure richesse que cela. Donc, en ressources humaines, le Canada, dans son développement, va obligatoirement avoir besoin de l'Afrique. Et si nous réussissions ensemble à construire ce partnership, gagnant-gagnant, je suis convaincu que même le voisin, suivez mon regard, va trembler un peu. Va trembler un peu. Et l'Afrique aimerait amener le Canada à faire trembler ce voisin. Merci.
Bravo, Monsieur l'Ambassadeur. Merci. So it's a little bit of a challenge to translate such a vibrant plea for Africa, but I will say that the Ambassador spoke, obviously he's the coordinator of the Francophone African ambassadors in Canada. He's traveled extensively in the continent and in the Francophone Africa countries. He spoke that in addition to the mineral production positions that I mentioned, which I had borrowed from him in our prior call, I have to say, struck me, that there's also uranium, and obviously we have the CANDU reactors in Canada. The number one producer is Niger, so it's another mineral. Plus, Africa has an amazing wealth of critical minerals. He mentioned, and I like the way you put this, Mr. Ambassador, that le Canada est attendu. Canada is awaited, I would say. We're waiting for Canada. I love it, the way you say so. Because Canada, as he pointed out, has no historical conflicts, has no luggage, as some other countries through the centuries had. We didn't exist in those years, so we couldn't, we built from scratch. He also mentioned that other than minerals, obviously there's energy, there's also agriculture that is a huge sector. I was speaking this morning with the company that bought Chocolat Privilège in Quebec, and I said, my God, you should have relations with Côte d'Ivoire, number one producers of cocoa in the world, and I have to say the best one, and so is Ghana, which is an observer at the L'Office de la Francophonie. But also there's a lot of land, and the challenge for tomorrow is food and food production. He mentioned the need for Canadian expertise. He mentioned the geostrategic position of Africa with the only US military base on the continent in Djibouti. And so is, I believe, the Chinese base. So it's strategically located. He speaks about the ability to do productive partnerships. We can be investors. We are in some sectors. Mining is one of them. And some other countries like Scandinavia, in fact, have doubled their trade, and they're now the #1 investor in renewable energy in Africa. It just says small countries can have a big footprint and develop trade relations and cooperation. So a number of countries await investments, and we can be investors with the support of the Canadian government, of course. And he says, well, don't await the future. Le futur, c'est aujourd'hui. The future is today. And he mentioned this number, which is in fact is double than my own statistics of upcoming population of 2 billion people, 70% of which are less than 25 years old. Right? And it's 2 billion in, Monsieur l'Ambassadeur, 2 milliards en quelle année? En 2030. So it's a huge trend. I will add one small point. In the Organisation de la Francophonie, there's 90 members, and Africa accounts for 27 countries. And as Matthew said, Canada is one of the, as a bilingual country, is a member. So together with Africa, we have significant weight in reaching out to other continents as well through the diaspora, which is the final point you mentioned. J'espère que c'est complet. Merci. Alors, sur cette note, I think the table is set for you, Mona, to speak about how Canada is renewing its approach in partnership with Africa.
Merci beaucoup. Merci tout le monde d'être ici aujourd'hui et surtout à la conférence ministérielle, la francophonie canadienne, d'avoir organisé ce panel. It's really an honor for me to be here today and to see many familiar faces here at the Toronto Global Forum. And I'm here, and I prepared remarks because I want to make sure that I covered in less than 4 minutes, as I was told, how Canada is engaging with Africa. And as African countries and institutions rapidly evolve, so too must Canada's engagement. In a time of global economic and geopolitical uncertainty, Canada must seize opportunities to strengthen economic and national security, including by diversifying our markets, improving supply chain resilience, enhancing peace, security, and human rights, and contributing to efforts that build and maintain corridors for critical goods while promoting local benefits for Africa, or in Africa. Last March, the Government of Canada launched the Canada's African Strategy. I have it with me here. And this is a partnership for shared prosperity and security. It's the first global strategy that can drive economic prosperity, security, and fairness for both Canadians and Africans for years to come, starting today, right? Canada's African strategy represents a robust new foreign policy designed to benefit Canadian and African partners, thus contributing to Canada and Africa's collective economic prosperity, as well as to global health, peace, and security. And our message is clear. We want to build a brighter and more prosperous future for Canadians and Africans, partners, and institutions. And with this strategy, we're trying to leverage the long-standing partnerships that we have with African countries to unlock unprecedented opportunities for prosperity and stability. And we've already started to discuss those today. And we want to make sure that we increase mutual beneficial economic opportunities, including through job creation, infrastructure development, and sustainable economic growth. Also partnering on peace and security challenges, including preventing and responding to conflict, preventing and countering terrorism, violent extremism, and transnational crime, and strengthening democracy, human rights, and inclusion in decision-making. Also to continue partnerships on sustainable development, including investing in African youth skills, training and health, strengthening the trade and development nexus, and continuing to address the root causes of conflict, and also advance shared priorities on the international stage to address the global challenges and mutually beneficial interests, including climate change, that I'm sure we'll continue to talk about. We need to strengthen diplomatic and people-to-people ties at all levels. We know of that. And I think that everybody knows this, that we have in Canada more than 1.3 Canadians are of African descent. Many retain strong ties on the African continent, including linguistic ones. And this is, of course, a source of real strength for the growing Canada-Africa relationship. The immense pride that African Canadians have in their African heritage is well-founded. It's vast, diverse, rich in culture and history, and of course, beauty and natural resources and sophistication. It is home to innovative, growing economies, and the region is also home to a young, as I said, educated, skilled, and dynamic population. So we also have two dedicated individuals that are working with us. One is Ben Marc Dienderi, who's the Canada's permanent observer to the African Union. He's been mandated to engage with high-level stakeholders and work with Canada's heads of mission in the region to advance Canadian interests, including promoted trade. So we have a key person working with us. There's also, to strengthen relationships in the Sahel region, we have Marcel Lebleu, who's the Canada's ambassador to Senegal, and also special envoy for the Sahel. And this is another key individual that we need to work with. We also established the Africa Trade Hub to coordinate our economic diplomacy, and we are also preparing many minister-led trade missions focused on innovation, infrastructure, and critical minerals, areas where Canada and Africa need to build resilient and future-ready partnerships. I have to end by saying that we have, as of 2025, the Trade Commissioner Service has 53 Canadian locally engaged trade commissioners across 20 offices in Africa. So we have the tools, we have the ground ready to continue to foster these relationships that we're creating on the trade and diplomatic side. And maybe a last statistic I wanted to share is that over the last 5 years, Canada has invested approximately $4.5 billion in bilateral international assistance programming in Africa to help build African economies, support health and education, and of course, respond to humanitarian needs. And therefore, Canada wants to invest and wants to make sure that we open pathways to diversify trade and create concrete ways for our businesses to succeed. And I can't wait to continue to share some of these experiences that we're having also in la Francophonie. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Secrétaire parlementaire. Wow, that's so exciting, this renewal. Talking about renewal, maybe Matthew, I'd like to ask you, Renew Capital, to give us maybe a very few words, a concrete example of the investment you're making, and also, what is it that you see and that others don't see?
Yeah, I see a lot. Well, first off, I think one thing we should all know is that there's a comment about Africa's age. I'm like ancient compared to people I walk around the streets in. Like I'm an old man relative to the types of founders we engage with. Now, but that's important because one thing you have to also understand is they're young, they're very high energetic, but they lack wisdom and they need help. Africa's resource rich, but capital constrained. And so you could, with the costs that you would take, for example, to invest in a startup in Toronto, I can invest in 10 to 15 in Africa. But it's not just the capital that they need. They need you to sit and advise them on their growth plan. They need to understand how a cash flow statement works. They have to, you put 100 grand into their bank account. They've never seen that capital before. So you really have to work with them a lot more and differently than the way you would approach startups anywhere else in the world. But what I see happening on the ground right now is it's happening faster even than I can quite keep up with. But as this massive youth bulge comes into the workforce, so you have about 15 to 20 million young people every year entering working age, with about 3 million formal sector jobs available for them. 75% of young people want to start their own business. And why? Because they no longer see their future as to be a football star. They see their future as to be a startup founder, right? Now, if you get that, and if Canada and anybody else that is looking at Africa gets that, you get the youth, you get Africa, really. And so he or she who just kind of gets that, like, oh, the number one fear of an African leader right now is getting ripped out of their bed at 2 a.m. by an angry youth of mobs. Sorry, that's true. So their number one priority is make sure those people are young, those young people are happy, and they're employed. And right now, the way they want to get employed is creating an app on a phone. So job number one for most African leaders, and for everybody else, is how do we promote that? Again, anybody can step in right now that has some background and some understanding of how the technology industry works, can come in and be a leader there. And I think Canada is doing that. Canada is at a beautiful position to do that. That's where I see huge opportunity. You don't want to promote something that there's just not energy. Young people don't want to mine, although there's tons of good resources there. They don't want a school. They want a phone with airtime. Give them a phone with airtime, they'll learn more than you can ever even imagine. And now with AI, they can build faster and better than anywhere that I'm seeing in the world. So we're going to see stuff come out of that part of the world that we have never seen before in the next 10, 15 years. I think I want to be, as a venture capitalist, a part of that story. And I think Canada, again, because you guys speak both languages, Africa's your oyster. Let's get over there and do some business. I don't know if I answered your question, but that's what I see.
Thank you. And you spoke about building the wisdom. And Isabelle, I know you were nodding. So do you see that the type of programs you're building in education, recruitment, and training can complement this effort or can do a spin-off?
Absolutely. I mean, it's so interesting that you're saying everything is building on the apps today, because the international organization also has been launching a prize for young entrepreneurs for the past 2 years, and I'm a jury member on to select the winners for the next edition. And there's a lot of the applicants, and it's all there's a lot of app suggested projects that are so out there that I had never thought of. So the imagination is there, the innovation is there, and they can do it online, right? So by educating them, by training them, by offering them the mentorship that they need, you're right. There's going to be more startups in Africa than we've ever seen in Canada or all over the world. And when we talk about opportunities, future opportunities, well, digital, right, technology, they're not going to miss it. They're going to be ahead of us sooner than later. And then all the transformation too. We've been, natural resources, whether they're mining or they are cocoa or les noix de cajou, they need our help building that expertise on how to better transform those products and watch them do it, and how they're going to be on the international trade market in the next few years once they are ready for it, right? So yes, you're right.
And I see that Madame Fortier is holding her microphone, and I know you're thinking about something, so.
Well, it's really interesting because there's so much opportunity. I had the privilege of meeting Matthew for the first time this morning, and we're already talking about how we're going to convene and bring forward opportunities for Canada and Africa to work together, just in the tech company. In less than 30 minutes, we were trying to see how we can foster that because there's so much opportunity. And I believe also, because we're talking about la francophonie, il y a tellement d'opportunités et il va falloir prioriser. And I'm just thinking prioritizing, and I think that Isabelle's right with the education is a field that we can all work together. But I believe, honestly, entrepreneurship, because they're so innovative and the youth know exactly what they can do. So we need to bring that support to make those connections. And I believe in Canada also, the youth, we have the very high unemployment percentage for youth right now. So why don't we connect the youth here in Canada with the youth in different African countries to work together? And I'm sure they will foster many business opportunities on the entrepreneurship front. So I'm just imagining creating trade opportunities where Canada, as a government, we can foster those opportunities to bring people together, and then they can get the job done, right? We need to convene, we need to influence. We might have a bit of money to help, make sure that those trade opportunities are there. I believe that we are at the space, and I think you also, with your experience in the last 40 years, we've done a lot, but we just need to really focus now and make sure that we deliver. Donc, je pense qu'on est rendu à un point où il y a beaucoup d'opportunités. Je vois des gens avec des visages qui hochent. There is great opportunity.
Monsieur l'ambassadeur, is the tech sector, la création d'applications, you know more than any of us, the market. Do you see this as a sector of joint collaboration, building new communities of you?
Moi, je pense que tout a été quasiment dit. Mais je voulais juste ajouter une chose qui intéresse beaucoup les Canadiens. C'est que l'Afrique francophone a déjà commencé à mettre en place un mécanisme qui puisse permettre aux entreprises qui viennent de pouvoir profiter des avantages fiscalo-douaniers. C'est à cause de ça que la zone francophone d'Afrique a déjà créé plus de 200 zones économiques spéciales. Ce qui permet donc aux entreprises canadiennes de pouvoir se déployer. Et ensuite, depuis 5 ans, l'Afrique a lancé les initiatives partenariat public-privé. Et là-dessus également, c'est un nouveau mécanisme pour l'Afrique, pour lever les fonds, pour financer son développement. Donc, il y a plein d'opportunités. Et la secrétaire parlementaire l'a si bien dit. Le premier défi, c'est la formation. Mais la formation va avec ce que l'Afrique possède aujourd'hui. Et là-dessus, nous pensons, comme les autres partenaires de l'Afrique, et que le Canada a sa place. Et qu'il n'y a pas d'hésitation possible. Mathieu l'a dit. Si on hésite, on arrive en retard. Et je ne souhaite pas que le Canada soit un partenaire qui arrive en retard dans cette marche de l'Afrique vers le développement.
Mr. the ambassador was pointing out something that's so important that I should have mentioned, is that there's been over 200 economic zones. You know, the fiscal aspect, the regulation aspect when we deal as a company with other companies is extremely important. That's also the basis of free trade agreements, as you know. But there's been huge progress, this and the public-private partnership. And I should say for those who are new that over 30 years ago, Canada helped to build in the mining sector the mining codes of many countries. That's why Canada is there. And the mining codes of the laws of several African countries, Francophone African, were based on le Code Napoléon, the civil code, the same as we have in Quebec. So I think as Canada, we have 2 legal code, common law, civil law. That's a huge advantage to best understand, and that's something that's the best you can have, because if you go to a jurisdiction that's different, it means more lawyers, more uncertainty, and not finding your way easily. So thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for pointing this out. and for reminding us that you certainly don't want Canada to be late. But you know, because we have multiple time zones, we try to be on time for at least some of the time zone. Now, coming back to when the sun rises in Canada to New Brunswick, your model is so innovative. Have you seen other provinces in Canada exploring that avenue of diplomacy, recruitment, and training, because it elevates the skills and prepare for partnership? Or are you alone with these innovative ideas?
Yeah, thank you, Christiane. No, we're definitely not the first one. Quebec is way more advanced than New Brunswick. We're such a small player, but and Quebec has offices, right, in Senegal and Côte d'Ivoire, and I think that's probably the next phase in terms of our investment, having people on the ground to build those relationships with the countries that we're targeting. So our strategy focuses on 6 countries. We have limited resources, human and financial, so we needed to focus and start somewhere. So it's Tunisia, Morocco, Côte d'Ivoire, Senegal, Benin, and Cameroon. And the reason why we chose those 6 countries is that when we did a big full-day consultation with all the partners in the province, that's mostly where the diaspora, the bigger diaspora groups are from. That's where our post-secondary institutions have been successful in recruiting students for those countries. So we needed to start it somewhere, but we're definitely not closing the door to any good opportunities, right? Any relationship building.
And Mr. Ambassador, some of your member countries in La Francophonie also have other official languages. Cameroon, in fact, I think is German and English. So do you see, you know best, do you see the Francophone African diaspora being spread across the country, or is it concentrated in some areas? Or are there surprises in terms of establishment?
Je dirais tout simplement que n'oubliez pas qu'au cœur de cette Afrique francophone, il y a la RDC, la République démocratique du Congo, qui, je crois, a la plus grande diaspora au Canada, et une francophone, et une diaspora super dynamique. Ensuite, nous avons aujourd'hui à Laval, un peu partout dans les universités canadiennes, des étudiants du Congo, de Côte d'Ivoire, du Sénégal, du Bénin, de Maurice, qui sont ici comme étudiants et qui, pour certains, reviendront en Afrique. Mais d'autres resteront ici pour permettre que le pont avec le Canada soit un pont continuel. Donc, moi, je pense que le Canada doit toujours regarder l'Afrique, non pas comme un continent qui vient demander de l'aide, mais comme un continent qui contribue à faire que le Canada avance, en même temps que le Canada, en tant que partenaire, donne à l'Afrique les moyens de pouvoir s'épanouir.
Mr. Ambassador raised the fact that the diaspora is premised on long-standing presence, including, in fact, that of the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is present across the country, elsewhere. And just for stats purpose, the RDC is 110 million people. Compared with the population in Canada, it's a huge territory as well. So it fits a couple of times, almost 3 times, to the population of Canada. And as a personal point, I will add that years ago I was in South Africa, where we were doing business as a Canadian company. And we meet several business relation, and I realized they all spoke French. Oh, I said, oh, do you speak French? Did you learn French in Johannesburg, Cape Town? And guess what? They were part of the Republic of Congo presence. They had established themselves in South Africa, and because they spoke, after learning English, 2 languages, they were excellent and dominant tradespeople. So I think we have to see the world as a web of contacts and building on friendship of neighbors, although sometimes we're separated by an ocean, but it's a small ocean. We have about 7 minutes left in this panel. I'd like maybe each of you, in in any order, maybe starting with you, Matthew, to say what's the single most important item that can help you do more? And do take advantage of the fact that you have a representative from Francophone Africa, and you also have a Parliamentary Secretary, Fortier, to express what is most needed so that we get to double our relations.
Got it. I think probably the most important thing is that the West, generally speaking, Canada in particular, and other Western countries, have to fundamentally just think different about Africa. That is step one. It's not Blood Diamond, it's not Black Panther, it's not safaris, corruption, and extractives. It has that stuff, and poverty. It has that, but I think we all have to just start to think that it is really the next massive market to emerge. Also, and I'm equal opportunity on both sides. In Africa also has to start thinking differently about itself. It has to start taking ownership of its future. It has to stop asking for handouts. I think that message was clear, and really start taking accountability of attracting the private sector and getting itself out of the way for young people to start businesses. So I think what we're gonna see happen really over the next couple of years is a massive rewiring of brand Africa in the world. And that begins with us, and it begins with them. And if both can start to say, hey, we can do this, we are the next great place to do business, we're gonna see amazing things happen. Second, I think for the private sector to really start to get involved and people to start doing trading and looking at that as a market, you gotta build trust infrastructure. Not de-risk. Like, trying to get risk off the table. It's like, of course it's risky. Any type of private venture is risky. But start to build up your trust infrastructure. Diaspora, I think, is a massive under-leveraged tool that Canada has. You've got smart, sharp, very well-off people here that know their home country better than anybody else, way better than I do. They can go back and start businesses and do a ton of things. So how do we mobilize that, a massive amount of potential there? And I think your government, also back to Canada, is doing awesome stuff on the ground. You should give them a high five anytime you see them. While everybody else was throwing money around and doing all this crazy stuff, Canada was actually strategically investing in building up something that aligns very much with that green thing she's got held under there, which was an actual strategy to engage Africa's future, which is, before aid got kind of nuked at the beginning of this year, you guys were already way ahead. And I think now you just got to maximize that. So, I don't know, that's what I would say.
Thank you, Matthew. Isabelle, we'll go the same order as we started. Your wish for one thing, quickly.
Well, New Brunswick will be hosting its first Africa-Canada Forum in Moncton, November 12 and 13. If you're interested, you can Google it and find information. So we need to talk about it, right? We need to promote it. We need to bring down the taboos, like Matthew said, and we need business people to come together and see what those opportunities are. The forum will also focus on how we can we bring a direct maritime line between African ports and more Canadian ports, and we have an expanding port in St. John in New Brunswick that is more than ready to welcome more containers. So it's having those discussions and bringing the people together, just like today, that we can make it happen.
Bringing more clementine to Canada and
that would be nice, right?
Soon arriving.
Chocolate, yes.
Monsieur l'ambassadeur, un dernier mot sur votre souhait, un souhait particulier.
C'est juste de dire à tous ceux qui sont là que l'Afrique est fière. L'Afrique est fière de ses multiples partenaires et l'Afrique est heureuse de voir, c'est vrai qu'il y a déjà quelques entreprises canadiennes, mais on aimerait amplifier cela et faire de l'Afrique un partenaire privilégié pour le Canada, parce que nous avons en partage cette langue, cette belle langue qu'est le français, et ça c'est une chance. Et le Canada est devenu le leader de la francophonie, parce que dans les contributions, dans les accompagnements, le Canada a pris la tête de tout ce qui se fait au niveau de l'Organisation internationale de la francophonie. En tout cas, nous serions toujours là, les ambassadeurs, à l'écoute et prête à vous accompagner. Merci.
Merci et merci, Monsieur l'ambassadeur. Monsieur l'ambassadeur a dit qu'il faut privilégier ce partenariat, que l'Afrique est prête pour nous et on doit être prêt et profiter du momentum. Et Madame Fortier.
En anglais, si vous voulez.
I will, yes, I will.
Well, it's
Oh,
great,
sorry, I could say it
Ambassador,
in French, it was in French.
I think the Ambassador and I are on the same page because, you know, Canada has been really fostering and wanting to do more business and trade and diplomatic relationships with African countries, and we're on the same page for that, Ambassador. With this, you know, document is not just a document, it's really a platform, and it gives tools for Canadians and African businesses to work together. There's this great opportunity, I want to say it again, la diaspora here in Canada, they know how to get things done and they know how to do business. So we need to really foster and give those tools to the diaspora and also Canadians to showcase that with this current, you know, geopolitical uncertainty with the South, the Prime Minister has been pretty clear. We need to diversify elsewhere. And where's that elsewhere? It has to be Africa. That is where we have many, many opportunities. And I think that's what the message is today, is that we're all open for business and we need to work together. And the last message I have to say is we also have an opportunity is to foster opportunities for youth, not only in Africa, but here in Canada through entrepreneurship. And also, let's continue to push women in those leadership, entrepreneurship positions, because women are able and do business quite good, and sometimes we kind of forget that there's that opportunity. So I just really want to bring back the fact that women have a really important role into this.
So thank you to a wonderful panel. We know that we have to think differently about Africa. The future is today. Le futur, c'est aujourd'hui. Et la innovative initiatives are rewarding, and we hope to see many people in New Brunswick for this first Africa-Canada Forum. And Minister, I think you've received I-5 today. You can publish this on your LinkedIn site. So I would just say that for me, as being involved in Africa, I started my career 40 years ago. I do recall that when I went to Africa, people spoke about La Route de l'Amitié, the friendship road that was built with Canadian support and that enabled the trade, the goods to move. It was an engineering feast. I would like today and tomorrow that we have the web friendship road based on apps developed together, because that's the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Christiane. And panelists, that was an extraordinarily well-run and very interesting discussion. So once again, our appreciation to all of you for doing this. I'd also like to show our appreciation to the Ministers' Council and the Canadian Francophonie who put this subject matter together with us. They are extraordinarily good partners, so can we please thank them as well. And just one final thought, with this program that you're running to identify African tech, a startup kind of thing, I wonder if maybe we could bring some of those folks over next year to the Toronto Global Forum, showcase their talent in front of Canadian business, but also to get them to network with our young leaders.
Such a good initiative. Joel, remember what Matthew said. For one opportunity that you'd finance here, you can finance 10. In Africa and in venture capital, if you choose the best one, if you have a bigger sample, you have more success.
Thanks again.